Ladies and gentlemen, you see, an excuse is not just a reason, it is a decoration. A decoration around something that is actually quite simple. Either I did it or I did it or I didn't do it. But the human mind, being a wonderfully complicated machine, doesn't like simplicity too much. So when we don't do something, when we fall short, when we miss a chance, we immediately begin weaving. Not lies exactly, but something more polished, more acceptable, we call them reasons, but really, they're just excuses in nice clothing. Now, the problem is not that we make excuses. Every human being at some point has. The real danger is when we begin to believe them, because once you start believing your own excuses, you become both the prisoner and the jailer, locked inside your own illusion. And the most tragic part is, it feels safe, it feels comfortable, because suddenly the blame is not on me, it's on my past, on my parents, on the government, on the weather, on my mood, on Mercury retrograde, on anything except the one person who could actually change the situation? Me. People think excuses are just tiny stories to make things easier, but if you look closely, they are small betrayals. Betrayals of your own potential, of your own promise. Because every time you say, I couldn't because… what you're really saying is, I gave up my power for a reason. And once you give it up often enough, you start forgetting you had it in the first place. And then you begin to live a life of reason, not responsibility, a life of reactions, not action. There's a certain elegance to the way we lie to ourselves. Have you noticed? We don't say, I was lazy. We say, I didn't have time. We don't say, I was afraid. We say, it wasn't the right moment. We don't say, I gave up. We say, it wasn't meant to be. And with every such polished sentence, we polish the cage we built for ourselves, making it look so beautiful that we forget we are trapped inside it. The world life existence, it doesn't pause for your excuses. It doesn't slow down because you are tired or afraid or uncertain. It moves with or without you. And this is not cruel, this is just how it is, like gravity doesn't care whether you're strong or weak, it pulls you anyway. Life doesn't adjust itself to suit your stories, it simply unfolds. And your only real power lies in choosing whether you want to ride with it or keep explaining why you're not. I'm not saying you should never fall or that you won't have struggles, of course you will. Being human means being fallible. But falling is not failing, staying down and telling yourself sweet lies about why you can't get up. That's where failure begins. Because an honest fall teaches you something, but a decorated excuse teaches you nothing except how to repeat the same cycle, wrapped in better language each time. Responsibility, you see, is not about blame or burden, it is about the ability to respond. To say, yes, I fell and yes, I will rise, it is not about perfection, it is about presence. Being present enough to see when you are avoiding your own growth, present enough to catch yourself in the act of excuse making and smile at the ridiculousness of it all. Because the moment you stop defending your limitations, something shifts not outside, but within. And that shift is the beginning of everything real. Because when there are no more excuses left to hide behind, what is left is raw, is powerful, is you, not the idea of you, not the defended version of you, but the unfiltered, capable, courageous you, the one who doesn't need to explain why something didn't happen because they're too busy making things happen, with grace, with grit, and with the quiet power of someone who has finally remembered they were never powerless to begin with. You know, people often imagine that just because something feels big inside them, a heartbreak, a failure, a disappointment, a broken promise, the world outside must surely pause, must notice, must adjust itself slightly to their inner turbulence. But life in its purest form has never worked that way, it simply moves, relentlessly, rhythmically, indifferently. Not out of cruelty, but because that is its nature. And if you don't move with it, it doesn't stop and look back to carry you, it flows right past. Whether you are joyful or broken, motivated or lost, life doesn't alter its course. The sun still rises, the moon still glows, the seasons turn, and even the people around you. They may pause for a moment, give a hug, say a word, but soon enough, they too are pulled by the rhythm of their own lives. And what you're left with is the stark realization that your reasons, however valid, however emotional, are your own. And life is not here to negotiate with your feelings, but to challenge your presence. You must understand the universe is not sentimental. It does not favor the wounded over the strong. It does not pause the rain because your roof is leaking. It does not delay dawn because you didn't sleep. It is fair only in its impartiality. And in that lies its truth, because if life really did stop for your reasons, it would also stop for someone else's, and soon nothing would move, everything would be stuck. weighed down by billions of excuses pretending to be emergencies. So the question is not why the world doesn't wait for you, the question is why you're still waiting for the world to notice your delay. Because when you see this clearly, truly, not philosophically, you stop expecting life to bend and instead you begin to stand up straighter, not in resistance, but in recognition that to live fully is not to be carried but to walk, even if your legs tremble, even if your heart is bruised, even if you're not yet ready. Because readiness is a lie we tell ourselves when we're afraid of beginning. And this is the key. The world doesn't stop what you do. And in that pause, you create a story filled with reasons, justifications, labels, past traumas, future worries, all wrapped up in sentences like, I can't right now, or it's too hard, or it didn't support me. Those stories, while they may soothe the ego for a time, are not currency in the economy of reality, because reality deals in action, not in tension, in movement, not mood, in doing, not dream. It may sound harsh, but it's actually liberating, because once you know the world won't wait, you stop waiting too, you stop asking for permission to heal, to grow, to act, to try again, and something fierce and quiet begins to awaken in a kind of inner engine that doesn't need applause or understanding, only the fire of truth. And the truth is, if you want to catch the train of life, you have to run to the station, not sit at home writing reasons why you missed it yesterday. Yes, sometimes we fall behind, sometimes we are genuinely hurting, and that is human, that is sacred even. But pain does not give you exemption from the flow of time. You sit and sing into it and or do you carry it like a torch and keep walking slower maybe, but still moving, still alive, still in rhythm with a world that only respects the one who shows up, not the one who explains why they didn't. So let your reasons be real, let them teach you, but don't let them become your anchor, because the river of life is not stopping. Not for you, not for me, not for the strongest or the most broken among us. And that is not something to mourn, it is something to marvel at. For in that unstoppable flow lies the invitation to rise again and again and again, not because the world paused for you, but because you refuse to be left behind. When we hear the word responsibility, most people feel a kind of weight like it's a burden, like it's something being put on their shoulders by society, by family, by expectations. But if you simply break the word open, responsibility, it becomes not a burden but a gift. The gift of being able to consciously choose your action in any given moment. And this, more than anything else, is what separates a life of chaos from a life of clarity. You see, to respond is an act of awareness, of presence, of inner stillness, where you don't act because of your anger or fear or pain, but you act despite them, from a space deeper than them, and when you live from that, your life stops being a series of emotional reactions and starts becoming an unfolding of conscious decisions. And that is when you begin to taste a different quality of life, one that is not driven, but directed. Reactions are mechanical. Someone says something, you flare up. Something goes wrong, you blame. Something hurts, you shut down. But all of this is habit, all of this is programming, it is not you. It is just the residue of past experiences playing on repeat, and unless you pause and become still enough to witness what is happening inside you, you will keep calling your reactivity by noble names like passion or urgency, when in truth it is just compulsion. The moment you begin to respond instead of react, something profound shifts. You start owning your inner space, you stop being a puppet of your emotions, and even when things outside are turbulent, you remain steady, not because you become cold or indifferent, but because you are no longer available for being pulled and pushed by every wave that passes. You become the ocean, not the ripple. And this does not mean you don't feel. Of course you feel. You feel joy, you feel pain, you feel grief, you love. But now your feeling is no longer your master, it is your message. It tells you what's happening inside, but it doesn't get to drive your behavior anymore. And this is not suppression, this is sovereignty, because when you respond from consciousness, not compulsion, you're not denying your emotion, you're simply not enslaved by it. Responsibility then is not about what others expect of you, it is not about duty or pressure, it is about stepping into your power, and your power lies exactly here, in the gap between what happens and how you choose to meet it. And most people live in that gap unconsciously. They fill it with habits, with judgments, with reflexes, but the one who pauses, breathes and chooses, that one begins to live with a kind of mastery that no position or title can offer. It's easy to react, it's easy to shout back, to blame, to lash out, to walk away, but that is deceptive because it costs you everything, your peace, your clarity, your growth. And yes, Responding takes more energy, more inner work, more silence, more effort, but it gives you something reactions never can. Alignment, because when you respond, your action matches your truth, not just your emotion. And that is how integrity is born. So responsibility is not something you carry, it is something you become. It is not about being perfect, it is about being present. It is not about controlling the world, but about not letting the world control you. And once you start living with this awareness, you don't need motivation, you don't need control, you don't even need praise, because the fulfillment is already in the act itself. In knowing that your life is being shaped not by reactions of the past, but by the intelligence of your present. But comfort, you see, is such a sweet word. Warm, soft, cozy, familiar. And we spend so much of our life trying to create it, chasing it, protecting it, thinking that if we could just be a little more comfortable, a little more secure, a little more secure, a little more undisturbed, we would finally be free, finally be at peace. But what we fail to realize is that comfort and growth rarely walk hand in hand. Because growth by its very nature means you are stepping into the unknown, stretching beyond the familiar, and there is nothing comfortable about that. The tree does not grow because it feels safe in the seed, it grows because the seed breaks, because the soil pushes, because the light calls and the darkness compels. And in the same way, your potential does not unfold in the cozy blanket of what you already know. It unfolds when life pokes you, when discomfort visits, when something no longer fits, and in that friction, you either shrink back into comfort or you step forward into growth. What we call discomfort is often life's invitation to evolve, to let go of the dead weight of routine, of stale habits, of lazy patterns, but most people confuse discomfort with danger. So they run back into the arms of what is known, even if that known is unfulfilling. Because comfort gives the illusion of safety, and the mind, poor thing, it loves safety, it loves predictability, it loves knowing what comes next, even if what comes next is the same dull repetition of a life unlived. But tell me, have you ever really grown when everything was easy? Has your strength ever come from a soft bed? Has your insight ever come from a room with no challenge? Has your courage ever been born in the arms of comfort? No, it is always the fall, the failure, the mess, the mistake, the heartbreak, the uncertainty. It is those sharp, uncomfortable moments that shape you, that carve you, that make you capable of holding more of life. Comfort seduces you. It says, stay a little longer, you've earned it. And of course, rest is necessary, healing is necessary, pauses are sacred, but when rest turns to retreat and pause becomes paralysis, you must ask yourself, am I living or am I hiding? Because comfort that protects you from life also prevents you from discovering who you really are beyond the labels, beyond the roles, beyond the personality you wrapped around your fears. Growth doesn't ask for perfection, it only asks that you be willing. Willing to be vulnerable, willing to not know, willing to try, willing to fall, and still keep moving. And this willingness does not grow in comfort. It grows in challenge, it grows when you're humbled, when you're tested, when the life you built stops working and something deeper begins to move in you. A fire is not interested in ease, but in expansion. So if you truly want to grow, not just succeed, not just impress, not just function, but grow, really grow, in awareness, in wisdom, in depth, then you must stop worshipping comfort like a god and start treating it like a guest. Welcome it when it comes, enjoy it, trust in it, but never let it become your master, because the moment you make decisions only to remain comfortable, you have already started decaying, not visibly, but inwardly, subtly, and nothing noble thrives in decay. And once you see this clearly, once you taste the aliveness that comes from discomfort faced willingly, from fear walked through consciously, from edges explored with eyes open, then even though comfort will still tempt you, you won't be seduced by it for long, because the part of you that wants to grow will become louder than the part that wants to hide. And that is when transformation is no longer a hope, it is a happening. Circumstances are the outer stage, the background, the scenery, and yes, they matter. They shape the conditions, they create the weather of your life, but they do not define the traveler. They do not define the one walking through the storm or the sun, because between what happens to you and what becomes of you lies one small and terrifyingly powerful thing: choice. And this choice is not always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it is just a whisper, a silent shift in direction, a moment where you decide not to be a victim of the scene, but the author of your response. Everyone has circumstances, some harsh, some privileged, some chaotic, some orderly. But if you look closely, you will see that two people can go through the same fire and come out with entirely different stories. Not because the fire was different, but because the one who walked through it made different choices. One chose to be broken and bitter, the other chose to be forged and focused. And that is the power we often forget we have. The power to choose not what happens, but how we meet what happens. Choice is not always visible to the outside world. It is not just the big decisions like where to go, what to do, whom to marry. It is often in the small silent corners. The choice to forgive when blame feels easier. The choice to try again when quitting would be justified. The choice to keep your integrity when compromise would reward you faster. And these choices, tiny as they may seem, become the architecture of your inner being, the real structure of who you are. People will always point to circumstances to explain a life. He had no support, she had too much pressure, they came from poverty, they were born into luxury. All these things color the canvas, they do not paint the masterpiece. Because what paints the masterpiece is not the hand life dealt you, but the way you played it. Not the story you were born into, but the script you chose to write from it. We live in a world obsessed with reasons why you are like this, what happened in your past, what trauma shaped you. And yes, there is value in understanding, but there is danger in worshipping it. Because the more you define yourself by your past, the more you lock yourself into it, and eventually what was once a circumstance becomes your identity. And now you are not just reacting to life, you are repeating it endlessly, mistaking your history for your destiny. But the moment you realize that every moment is a fresh chance, a clean page, a new canvas waiting not for better circumstances, but for deeper choices, then you begin to taste freedom, the kind of freedom that has nothing to do with money, with status, with but has everything to do with self-authorship. The ability to say, this happened, yes, but I decide what it means now. I decide what it becomes in me, I decide who I become next. This is not about denial. You don't have to pretend the pain wasn't real, the loss wasn't heavy, the injustice didn't hurt. But you do have to decide whether those things are going to be anchors or fuel, whether they will be the end of your sentence or just a comma before your eyes. And that choice is not easy, but it is yours. And that makes all the difference because the one who chooses becomes powerful not by dominating others, but by refusing to be dominated by their own past. So stop looking at your circumstances as the sculptor of your life. They are just the clay, the wind, the pressure. You are the sculptor, and every time you choose with awareness, with courage, with alignment, you are carving something deeper than a success. You are carving a soul that cannot be shaken by the storms of circumstance, because it knows the only true shape of life is the one we choose to give it. People often believe that what has happened to them is the final word, that the way they were raised, the money they had or didn't have, the wounds they carry, or the praise they lack, the places they came from, or the people who left them, that these things are the sculptors of their life. But the truth is, all of these are only ingredients, and the hand that stirs the pot, that decides what becomes of all this is not your history, not your pain, not even your environment, but your ability to choose what you do next, how you respond now and who you decide to become despite it all. You are not what happened to you. You are not your failure or your fortune, not your trauma or your titles, because these are just conditions on the outside, and while they are real, they are not in charge. What is in charge is the one in you that sees, that knows, that chooses. And every time you act from that space, even a little, you are rewriting the script, you are moving from survival to authorship, from being a consequence to being a cause. Yes, circumstances shape the battlefield, but they do not decide how you fight. They do not tell you when to rise, when to rest, when to leap, when to kneel. You choose that, and if you don't choose, if you let circumstances choose for you, then you are no longer living, you are only reacting. And a life of reaction is not a life at all. It's just a repetition of the same old patterns dressed in different days. When you say, I'm like this because that happened, it may feel honest, it may even feel therapeutic, but look closely, there is a quiet danger in that sentence because slowly you start giving away your power to things you can no longer change, and when you give power to what is over, what is past, you lose the only power that matters, the power to shape what comes next. And I am not saying it is easy, I am not saying you just snap your fingers and become free. I am saying that the path begins the moment you take ownership, not of what happened, but of how you will carry it, how you will speak from it, how you will grow through it. Because even the most broken beginning can birth something luminous when touched by conscious choice. Sometimes we forget that choice isn't about comfort, it is about alignment. It is about choosing the hard thing because it is the true thing. It is about doing what your deeper self knows even when your wounded self resists. And this kind of choice is not loud, it doesn't need to be, it just needs to be consistent, like water carving stone, not through force, but through patience. And once you really begin choosing, choosing awareness over blame, choosing growth over stagnation, choosing discipline over distraction, choosing presence over regret, you will see that your life starts to carry a different vibration. Not because your circumstances changed overnight, but because you changed the way you relate to them. And that shift is the beginning of true freedom. So no, you are not the product of what was done to you. You are not the inevitable outcome of your circumstances. You are the living result of every choice you've made until now. And the beautiful, frightening, liberating truth is that in this very moment, you can begin making different ones. Excuses are not lies exactly. They are simply soft cushions we throw under our failures so they don't hurt as much. They are clever stories, elegant distractions, mental furniture we arrange to make our inability feel justified. Our fear look rational, our stagnation appears circumstantial. And though they may feel like protection in the moment, what they truly do is separate us from our power. Because every time you reach for an excuse, you are reaching away from responsibility, away from courage, away from courage, away from your own potential waiting in silence to be claimed. Then yes, excuses come easy because they are backed by history, by emotion, by past wounds and missed chances, by people who didn't believe in us or stood in our way. And the mind is so efficient, it collects all of these and turns them into evidence. Why it's too late, why you can't start now. Why others had it easier, but all the while something in you knows this is a prison dressed as logic, a cage that looks like comfort, and the key has always been in your hand. The truth is, power begins not when everything is in your favor, not when life rolls out a red carpet, not when people cheer you on, but when you stop needing permission. When you stop leaning on excuses like crutches and stand up on the trembling legs of choice, even if they are weak, even if they are unsteady, because power doesn't come from confidence, it comes from the raw willingness to move forward, even when confidence is nowhere in… And that movement begins the very instant you drop the excuse. Not later, not someday, but right then, because in that one act you stop being at the mercy of circumstance and become a force of clarity. The world may not change immediately, but something changes that something changes in you, something quiet, something strong, and from that shift comes action, not noisy, desperate action, but deliberate, aligned, unstoppable action that grows from presence, not pressure. Excuses are heavy. They weigh you down without you noticing. They cling to your identity, to your story. They sound like you, feel like you, but they are not you. They are just patterns you inherit, scripts you remember. Shields you built when you were still learning how to survive, but now if you want to live truly life, you must be willing to drop what once protected you and now only limits you. The moment you say no more, not with defiance, not with guilt, but with stillness, with clarity, with the deep understanding that nothing changes until you do, that's the moment the shift begins. And in that moment, you are no longer the one waiting for the right time, the right mood. You become the one who makes the time right by choosing, the one who makes the mood irrelevant by showing up, the one who reclaims power not by force, but by finally taking full ownership of this life, this breath, this step. You see, life doesn't wait for your excuses to expire, it keeps moving, it keeps offering chances disguised as challenges, gifts wrapped in discomfort, and unless you meet those offerings with power. Not the power of position or control, but the power of presence, the power of inner alignment. You will keep missing the doorway to your own evolution while explaining convincingly why it's not the right moment yet. And when you drop excuses even for a moment, what you pick up is not just power, you pick up honesty, you pick up momentum, you pick up responsibility not as a burden but as a blessing. And in that space, you don't need to be pushed or motivated because now you are moved by something deeper than circumstance. You are moved by the quiet recognition that you were never waiting on life, life was waiting on you.